And take your seats. Jack Barr is going to be giving a presentation on how presentation matters in fly fishing. So Jack, you got a better known and operated guide service. How long have you had that guide service?
About 4 years now.
About 4 years? Where do you do most of your fishing?
Central Pennsylvania and right here in Erie.
All right, Erie over to Central, that sounds good. And if you've been doing the guide service for how long have you been fishing yourself, sir?
I have been fishing since I was about 4.
About 4 years old?
Yeah,
so that's what, like 30 years now probably,
yeah,
at least?
Yeah, about that. Okay. You know, started out carp fishing and bluegill fishing with my dad.
Bluegill fishing with your dad?
Oh,
perfect.
Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, we've only got the one, so we're just making it work. Hey guys, so bring it in. Please give some respect for Jack. He's got the mic. He's going to have the floor, so clear it up. Clap it up for Jack. Thanks for coming up, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'll give you a little short introduction. My name is Jack Barr. I've been fishing most of my life. I've spent the last 30 years of it fly fishing. The last 6 to 7 years, when I knew I was going to retire a little early, I decided I was going to dedicate myself to fly fishing and fly casting. Just to give you a little background, I got hooked up with some very, very special people in the fly fishing industry. By luck. Ended up being mentored by some of the best in the country. Yes. Ended up being mentored by some of the best in the country. And I'm not afraid to give those people shout outs. A gentleman out of Bryson, North Carolina by the name of Mac Brown wrote a book, Casting Angles. He's one of the top fly casting instructors in the world. If you look him up, he's a pretty phenomenal caster. Mac got me hooked up with other MCIs, which stands for Master Casting Instructors in the country. A gentleman named Eric Cook out of Atlanta, and another one, and I butcher his name every time I say it, spends half a year in England, London, England, and another half of the year in Connecticut, and his name is Shaker Ben-Hadavar. These guys, when I tell you they are at the top of the game, they are at the top of the game. So I have been taught and educated by some of the best. A little story about 6 years ago, I decided I was going to become a guide. And I thought, well, I better get some credential behind my name. Nobody knows who Jack Barr is. Most people have never even heard of Jack Barr. I better get some credentials behind me. So I got hooked up with this Mac Brown out of Bryson, North Carolina. And I had been fly fishing for about 30 years. These tribs, central Pennsylvania, all the way around. I thought I was a pretty good fly fisherman. I mean, I could come up here and hold my own with anybody in these creeks. The first day that I spent in a week-long class with this gentleman, in 10 minutes, I realized that I didn't know much. I was humbled very, very, very quickly. Just in technique. You become self-taught, you listen to your buddies, you watch YouTube. I can't explain how far it goes to get yourself, if you want to become a better fly fisherman, to get yourself around somebody that really, really, really knows what's going on. It's an amazing, absolutely just amazing what's out there and what you learn. So I am a fly casting instructor with Fly Fishing International. I run my guide service. I am a pro guide with Douglas Outdoors, as well as run my guide service and help with some different programs. The PA Steelhead Association, I'm on the board of directors of that. Trout Unlimited, just on and on. So with that being said, let me get started with presentation matters. Presentation with a fly rod. Where does presentation start? Where does presentation start with your fly rod? With what you got rigged up? With what you're going to fish with that day? Absolutely not. That presentation matters the second you get to the creek. When you get to that creek, 90% of the guys in Erie, and I watch it, man, they get out of their car, they take off running down to the creek, they get their spot, they go wading right out in the middle of the creek. They already blew that hole up. Already blew it up. I watch it at trout run. I watch guys go down the trout run, they wade out until they're chest deep in water. Those fish are trying to come to the shoreline. You do not need to be chest deep in water to fish. So that presentation has to start right when you get to the creek. Take a minute, stop, stand there, watch, see what happens. Look, see where the fish are. Now, make a decision. How am I going to fish to these fish? Am I going to do the old 90-degree cast and float presentation? What I mean by that is I'm going to stand at the creek and I'm just going to throw that line, drift, throw that line, drift, throw that line, drift all day long? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Those fish are so conditioned to seeing that exact drift time and time and time again that you're just killing yourself. Look at those fish. See where that pod is. Get up above those fish. Fish to the fish, not through the fish. I watch guys do it all day long, man. They throw in there's a pod of 20 fish. Throw in there and let everything drift right down through the middle of them. The fish spread out, come back together. They've seen it a million times. You get up above those fish and fish right to the front of them. Or fish the edge of that pod. Now your presentation's a little different than everybody else's and you will get those bites. Play in those seams. Guys walk in, get there, first thing they see that big run, we'll throw right in the middle of it. Man, start right where you're at. Throw 5 feet, throw 10 feet, throw 15 feet, throw 20 feet, throw 30 feet. And I can tell you with a fly rod, 30 feet, 35 feet, that's all the further you need to be throwing that rod to steelhead fish. It's all the further you need to be throwing that rod. Guys try to make these big old hero casts and pound these holes. You're you're just beating them to death. They're conditioned, they're gonna know you're there. So what do? Start real close. Fish that little bit of a drop off, right where that creek starts to drop off. You will be amazed at how many fish are right along that edge. They don't want to be in that fast water. Unless they're moving, they're not going to be right in that fast water. You watch these fish, you'll see how they act. Start close. Start close. Work your way out. Once you're out to about 30 feet of line, then here's your presentation. If you got to get further, it's not cast further. Take a step. Fish that line because you can control that line. Once you get over about 30, 35 feet of fly line, I can guarantee you that there's about 95% of the fly fishers in the room cannot control a line and get a good drift past 35 feet of line out. I can guarantee you that. I mean, that takes years and years of skill and practice to be able to mend the line, the microcurrents, the different things that you got going on to get a dead drift. And you need that dead drift to catch these steelhead. So with that being said, take the step. Take the step. Fish 5, 6, 7 drifts. Take the step. Now you're not crashing through the water. You're not blowing up your hole. You're taking your time and you're presenting right. When I said get above those fish, fish to the fish, how about changing an angle from down below? Scenario of last year, one of the holes on Elk Creek, very common hole, everybody fishes it, bunch of fish laying in it, laying in the tail outs, everybody's doing the 90-degree drift to them. I let those guys all clear out, I walked down, I got in the riffle below those fish and started casting directly upstream. 6 out of 7 casts, I was hooked up. Gentleman on the side of the bank come over, he said, "My goodness, what are you doing?" It's nothing special. I just changed the angle. So changing the angle has a lot to do with your presentation. You're casting with a fly rod. 99% of your casting with a fly rod in Erie's going to be a roll cast. Going to be a roll cast. Just the conditions of our creeks, where we're at, what we have behind us. Take some time to learn to roll cast. I walk along the creeks and I can tell you, I watch a lot of fly fishermen. Most of them can't roll cast. They get their line out there, but they can't roll cast. What they do, they get to the hole, they pick that rod up, whip, whip, whip 5, 6 times just to get their line out. You already blew up your hole. Does this make sense? You already blew up your hole. You put 5 presentations in that water before you ever made a good cast. You just ruined what you was doing. Learn to get a good roll cast. And it's not power, it's a little snap. But that's, getting into casting instruction is something a little different. But learn to do those little things. Learn to do those little things. Different times of year, your presentation. In the fall, we got very low clear water, 90% of the time. We got a little shot of rain the other night, brought these creeks up. I can guarantee you if we don't get another 2 days of rain and we get 4 days of sunshine, they're going to be right back to where they were 2 days ago. The only difference is the fish got to move a little bit and you're going to have some fish scattered out and you're all going to go in there in that real clear water and try to catch those fish. What do I see? Stand on Whitman's Bridge. I watched a pod of 10, 12 fish last year in the little tail out at the end of Whitman's Bridge there. I watched 5 different guys walk up to those fish with a 7-gram float, split shot everywhere, big old egg sacs, low clear water. The fish were just laying there suspended mid-level of the water and they're throwing on top of those fish. Not one of them caught a fish. I was there half a day just watching people. Not one of them caught a fish. And I thought to myself, why would you do that? Why would you do that? This was a perfect time to get very, very small. Very, very small. You'll hear a lot of guys, it's last couple of years, the dry dropper systems really come into place in Erie. A lot of people can't effectively fish a dry fly and a dropper. And the problem with a dry fly and a dropper, and I'm gonna give you a couple little secrets here, so pay attention. They're very hard to adjust the depth of your dropper. Because when you tie your dry fly on and you drop your dropper down off of you, you're at a set depth. So what cures that? There's a cool little product. They sell it right here. They got it. New Zealand yarn indicators. This New Zealand yarn indicator attaches to the line with a little tube. It's yarn. Get some floating, dry fly floating. Douse this thing down. You can make it very, very small for a small nymph. You can make it very, very large for a bigger nymph. But it will act on the water just like a dry fly. These steelhead aren't inclined to eat a dry fly anyway. 30 years I've caught 2 of them on a dry fly and I have tried it 1,000,000 times. These little things right here make all the difference in the world in low, clear water. You can suspend 2 nymphs off of this if you use a big enough piece. It acts completely different in the water than a float. If you take a dry fly or this piece of yarn, throw it in the current, and you take a bob, indicator or whatever you want, throw it in the water, watch what they do. They will do 2 entirely different things. So getting stealthy, getting a little bit stealthy in that low clear water this time of year will make it very, very effective. Very effective. I always hear, well, what flies? What fly you got? What fly you got? What fly you got? What fly you got? That fly doesn't make a whole lot of difference. In one day in Erie, these steelhead are caught on everything from salted minnows, big hunks of pyre bait, rubber minnows, squirmy worms, prince nymphs, egg patterns. I mean, you name it, somebody caught a fish on it. Big old Cleos, somebody caught a fish on it. But I guarantee you, if you present it right, whether it's an egg pattern, a prince nymph, a stonefly, any of that, if you present it right with a dead drift, and you get to the depth that you need to be where those fish are at, you will catch fish. Low clear water, 99% of the people go way too deep. You constantly hear, oh, you got to get down to them fish. You got to get down to them fish. I've spent 20 years watching these fish. In that low clear water, they do not hug the bottom. They do not hug the bottom. They suspend mid-level of however deep that water is. And I've watched it time and time and time again. If you're going to the bottom, you're below them fish. Trout don't feed up. Very rarely do trout go down and dredge the bottom looking for food. Trout use their eyes. They feed at the level they're at or up. Since the time they were in the hatchery raceways this big, they've been fed from above. That's where they eat. Wild trout do the same thing. They will get in a column and they will feed up. With them being sight feeders and feeding up, what's that tell you about your presentation? So a rainbow trout, whether it's rainbow trout, steelhead, no matter what it is, they got about a 30-degree sight of angle for vision. So if you do the math on that, a 5-foot tall person needs to be 30 feet away from that fish so that fish can't see him. So there's very few people in here under 5 feet. So you think about it. If you're between 5 and 6 feet, you need to be 30, 35 feet away from those fish. So what do? Take a knee. Take a knee. Learn to cast from that knee. Don't stand right over top of them. Don't get where you see them. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're in Walnut Creek or you're, in Trout Run or one of those places where you don't have a choice, where you've got a very limited area to fish, you're not going to have much of a choice. So a lot of these things will come into effect when you're up in the creek, you take a little walk, and you're able to find you some fish. Lines and leaders. A lot of people are big on using a tapered leader. Buy them in a pack. Fluorocarbon, mono, different lengths. I haven't fished one of these in years. I just don't care for them. And there's a reason that I don't care for them. They're tapered. What I mean by that, they start at the butt section where it attaches to your fly line very, very thick. They're about 50% of that diameter, 30% of a smaller diameter, and 20% tippet. What's that do to your presentation? Well, I'll tell you what it does to your presentation. The fastest water in any creek is on the surface. If you take a creek that is 3 feet deep or a creek that is 6 feet deep, the fastest water is on the surface. The mid column slows down and the slowest water is on the bottom. Okay? So if I take a thicker diameter and I'm putting it in the surface of that water that's the fastest, I'm putting more drag on that line than I am on the bottom, right? So the bottom's going to be real slow, my top's going to be real fast. What do I got? I got my indicator, shot, everything going over top those fish before my presentation ever got there. That is the reason why I don't like them. If you buy them, I would highly recommend that you take that 9-foot leader, cut about the first 4 feet of it off, tie yourself a little micro swivel on that thing, and from that micro swivel down, nothing but tip it. That way, where your float's at and everything below your float is a small, single diameter of tippet, instead of having that thick line in the surface, fast water, or the current. Make sense? That will give you a better drift. That will give you a better drift. To catch these fish, you have to have a dead drift. If you got drag, and what I mean by drag is, if your bait's moving faster than the current speed, they're not going to take it. It's not a natural presentation. And it doesn't matter what fly you're using, what you're using. So yeah, tippet. Tippet is a choice that, hey, I'm all about do what you can afford. Do what you can afford. But I listen to these things, and you go on YouTube or go on any of these Facebook channels, and I don't care what Erie site you go on. You need 4-pound test. You need 2-pound test. You got a 6-pound test. I'm gonna tell you something. No, you don't. No, you do not. Why in the world would you go into any Lake Erie tributary where any given cast that you make, you have the opportunity of catching a fish between 6 and let's say 10, 11, 12 pounds? Why would you throw 2-pound test line in there? That doesn't make a lick of sense to me at all. Not at all. But what you do want to pay attention to is the diameter of your tippet. And if you don't think it makes a big difference of what you buy, let me explain this to you. And I'm not picking on any particular brand here, so I hope nobody thinks that. 3X, 8 thousandths in diameter, 6-pound test, right? It's a fluorocarbon tippet. Fluorocarbon tippet, 3X, 8 thousandths in diameter, exactly the same as that. 9.5-pound test. So what's the sense in using that? Where you want a presentation? Here's your diameter. And I got a third more strength to land my fish with that small diameter. So that 3, 4, and 5X, you can get 3, 4, and 5X to be 6, 8-pound test line in small diameters. What's that do? That helps your presentation. That presentation matters. That presentation matters. Getting a dead drift. What's the biggest part of getting a dead drift? The initial cast. The initial cast. We as fishermen are poor casters. Believe that. We are very poor casters. Most people cast their line into the water, let it drift, and hope they catch a fish. Hope I get one. Hope I get one. Hope I get one. I've learned to fish with what I call intent. Every cast I make, I intend to catch a fish. That sounds kind of cocky. That sounds kind of crazy. But that's the kind of focus that I have while I fish. That cast means everything. People pick up a fly rod and they think if they lay that line out straight, they made a good cast. Well, let me tell you something. The only thing you did was as soon as you made that straight line cast, your line's already taut. You caused drag from the very moment that line hit the water, and you're not going to recover from it. So learning the cast where you do make a straight line cast, but mend before that cast finishes, before I hit the water, to introduce slack. Slack lets my fly sink. If I throw into a stream and I'm throwing across and down and I got a straight line presentation, that line hits straight. As soon as it hits, it starts dragging. It's never going to go down. The only way I can get that to go down is to introduce slack into it. That is the only way it's going to happen. The water tension is going to raise that right up out of where you need it. So you have to be able to introduce some slack into your line. People are like, oh man, slack in the line, huh? You ain't going to be able to set the hook. Trust me, you'll be able to set the hook. You'll be able to set the hook. You'll know when they bite. So putting slack in that line to get it to sink is key. Being able to mend your line and keep line off the surface of the water is key. The more line you have laying on the water, the more problems you're going to have. That's why I tell everybody, Don't fish past 30 feet. You're not going to control the line that you have laying in the water. You're not going to get a good drift. Don't be afraid to go short. I spent last week, 2 weeks ago, I was down in North Carolina fishing with a guy, Gordon Vanderpool. He's one of the coaches of Team USA fly fishing team. I went down and spent a day with him doing nothing but Euro nymphing, because I needed to up my game of Euro nymphing. I wanted to really, get a better understanding of it, what I had. I bet I didn't fish with any more than 20 foot of line all day. All day. And we caught, I don't know, I'd say we caught somewhere between 75 to 100 trout in a 6-hour period. Right here. We didn't have any line in the water. We didn't have any drag going on. He taught me to be able to handle that line without all that on the water. When you do have your line in the water, mending your line on the water. We do it way, 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 way too hard. I watch guys whip that whole rod. Learn to mend to your indicator. If you're indicator fishing later in the wintertime and you're using a little bigger float, let's just say you're using the good old ball float here. These little football floats, these are awesome little floats. The only thing is that little rubber thing in the middle of it, they need to improve it. They will come off your line when you catch a fish. I don't care how many times you twist that thing. Shove a toothpick in it. One of these. In the wintertime, whenever that water turns green, don't be afraid to use a little bit bigger of an indicator. Doesn't matter. Me personally, I like a white one. The white's a little harder to see some days in the sun, but hey, that bubble line, that foam that we all chase, it's white. They see it all day long. They see it all day long going over their head. They don't see big orange and red indicators. They do here. They see a bunch of them and they move away from them. That white indicator will go a long way. That little yarn will go a long way. But learn to mend your fly line to your indicator. That comes by wee little, small, tiny circles. When that line's out there, you don't want a big old mend, just this much. Wee little soft. It'll move it. What direction do I mend? Everybody, I got to mend upstream, got to mend upstream. Nope. You got to mend every direction there is. You got a faster current in front of you and a slower current right here in front of you, and your line's laying in that slow current now. This is coming back to you while that's going that way. So I need to mend downstream. If I'm fishing upstream and I got the same amount of current, I need to mend downstream to keep up with that float. Make sense? Think about what direction you're at and where you're handling your line. Because every time you mend and you move your float, you move your bait, and everything you just ruin your presentation. And you don't catch fish. I had a client last year, younger kid, 20-something years old, dead of winter, got in a hole, had to be 20 fish in there. Told him, I want you to roll cast that out there and nice little mends downstream. He threw 20 times, never caught a fish. 20 times. And the last thing I do as a guide is stand there and go, hey, I told you need to do this, and hey, I told you need to do that. I'm not going to make your day bad. I'm going to cheer you on and just try to give you some instruction as we go. His feet got cold. I'm getting out. I got to walk. My feet are cold. Go ahead, fish while I'm out. I said, no, I don't fish while I have clients here. He said, well, you think they'll bite. With that little smart attitude. I said, they'll bite. He said, you can't catch them fish. I made one cast, mend, boom, fish. Would you like to reel that in? I can't believe you caught that fish. I said, that's all I've been trying to get you to do for an hour and a half. That's all I've been trying to get you to do. Thought it was a fluke. Oh, you got lucky. Okay, well, his feet got warm. He got back down in the water with me. I said, do you mind if I mend your line with you? So we make that cast, and I hold the rod with him, and we make the mend, boom, fish. That's all I've been trying to get you to do. We are way too aggressive. especially us guys. Women and kids, hey, nice and easy, they understand it, they get it. Men, we're hard heads. When something doesn't work, what do? Hit it harder. You don't get the nail in, hit it harder. When you try to dig a hole and it's not digging, you get a bigger shovel, right? When your cast isn't going where you need it to do, what do? You throw it harder. All you're doing is working against yourself. You're working against yourself. With a fly rod, everything is so smooth and so easy, it's unbelievable. Power has nothing to do with it. The slower that you go, the better you're going to be. I promise you that. I'm not going to get a bunch into casting and stuff like that. If somebody wanted to get into casting, they can get a hold of me. And that gentleman right there, he'll tell you. I'll teach you. So in the wintertime, that water gets good and green. That's good fishing water, boy. That is when you need that dead drift. Those fish start getting lethargic. They're slowing down a little bit, a little harder to catch. Get that dead drift. Learn to get a dead drift. Get that thing going at or slower than the speed of the surface of the water. That'll get you a good drift. If you learn to achieve that, you will catch more fish. I promise you that. I know a lot of people talk about getting that drift, but a lot of people don't get that drift. It's something that you got to learn. And it just means everything. I don't know how else to explain that. I'm going to backtrack here for a second. I'm going to go back to a leader setup, and especially in the wintertime, I think this makes a huge difference. I talked about using nothing but tippet from your indicator length down, and me not using tapered leaders. I'll tell you what I do use. This old cheap stuff right here. They sell it right here. You can get it anywhere. Maxima Chameleon. This is not fishing line. People see this stuff, think it's fishing line. It's not fishing line. It's leader material. It's for making your own leaders. Right here in Steelhead Alley, you don't need all that crazy taper. You don't need to tie a whole bunch of knots down a line and make a taper leader. You don't need none of that. If you're fishing a 10-foot rod, think about this. You're fishing a 10-foot rod, and I take 5 foot of this, attach it to my fly line down to a swivel. That's half the length of my rod. I add 3 foot of tippet, and I put a fly on there. Right? Now I'm down to 8 feet. I got another 2 feet that I can play around with for a second fly to run that tandem rig that we all run so often. I never have that fly line inside the tip of my rod. I watch these guys get these 9, 10, 12 foot leaders and all this. You don't need that in Steelhead Alley. I could take you out and get in my truck right now and pull a rod out. That Maxima Chameleon right there has been on that line for 4 years. 4 years, same leader. I'm still fishing it. The stuff doesn't break, it stretches, it's great. So that taper diameter, you don't need it, but below that split shot, or below that swivel, is what matters. Below your indicator is what matters. One thin, level length of line. That will give you your presentation. Wintertime, that dead drift. Hey, and you know, I said something about flies. Flies, what flies? What fly, what fly? Well, everybody big on the egg, big on the zonker, big on just patterns and patterns and patterns from here in Lake Erie. They switch that stuff up. Switch that stuff up. I have, in the dead of wintertime, gone into a place that's been beat to death with egg sacks, egg patterns, zonkers, woolly buggers, whole 9 yards. I get out a size 14 case caddis fly and sit there and seine them fish out of that creek. with a dead drift in the dead of winter. Mike's sitting back there at that table. Mike kind of laughs at me all the time because I pick on him a lot about some old school flies, and I'm not going to tell you all what they are. But they're old school flies. I tell Mike, he said, man, I haven't tied that pattern in years. Well, guess what? It works because those fish have not seen it every single day. Do something different. Instead of going wee tiny, go way big. Put something on there the size you'd never think they'd eat. It's different. Get very, very small. It's different. When I say very small, a lot of times like egg patterns, I hear guys, oh, you need size 16 egg pattern, you need size 18 egg pattern. What difference does it make? You take a size 12 hook and you cover the whole thing with yarn, it's going to look like the size of an egg sack. You take a size 12 hook and you put a wee little tiny dot on that thing, it's going to look like a size 16. You still got a better hook to keep your fish hooked, right? I do not believe for 1 second that these fish are line shy, leader shy, or fly shy. I believe if you present it right, they will eat it. 99% of the problem is your presentation. If you're not catching fish in the first 5, 6, 7 drifts, change something. Don't stand there for 2 hours throwing the same fly in the same run, doing the same exact thing. It's no different than going. I watched a team of kids, whole team of kids, fly fish, and they had them all Euro nymph. They had them all nymph fishing. They was all nymph fishing early in the morning. All nymphing. I go down the creek, a couple of us go down, hey, how you guys doing? Oh, I haven't caught a thing. Okay. So I go to the surface. Well, you've been nymphing for 2 hours, you haven't caught anything. I throw on a dry fly dropper about 6, 8 inches down below, first 3 drifts catch fish. How'd you do that? Well, that wasn't working. Why are you staying there doing it for another 2 hours? Change up, don't be afraid to change. Think about the conditions you're in. So trout see to eat. They're looking for your stuff to bite, right? You get there early in the morning and it's an overcast day. Don't go deep. All the light that's penetrating the water for them to see is at the surface. Fish shallow. That's a presentation. As that sun comes up and the day gets brighter, the fish will drop. Then you go deeper, deeper, deeper. And then in the evening, when the light starts dissipating again, the light penetration in the water is what helps them see. Use those to your advantage. It's just little things like that that'll make all the difference in the world in your fly fishing. All the difference in the world. In the springtime, after that ice goes away, and you're going to go out and you're going to steelhead fish with that fly rod, I'll tell you one of my favorite things to do. Take that floating fly line you got, put you a sink tip on the end of it, about 4 foot of 10-pound test line, and get you some big old flies. And get in fast water, long riffles. Forget them holes. Get in them riffles. Go up the top of them riffles and just start swinging that fly through there. The same way I talked about fishing the other flies. Start at the head of it with a nice short line and just work your way through there. Those fish love that shallow, fast water in the spring. It warms up quick. The sun's penetrating it. They use that riffle for cover. Use that riffle for cover. I don't know how much experience y'all got steelhead fishing, but you go to a hole, you'll see fish in the front at the head of the hole, in the center, and in the tail. Fish them for a little while. Watch what happens. And this is how you can tell that your presentation's bad. Fish those fish for a little while. And when they all get together and they all move up to the very head of that pool and stick their nose in that fast water coming into that run, you've got them spooked. They did that for cover. They use that fast water for cover. It gives them some safety. And when you see all them fish move up there, you can just bet you just ruined that whole haul. Leave. They're not going. The only thing you're going to do is put on a bunch of weight and snag them in the top of the head when you come through that fast ripple. And that's not fishing. So you can watch those fish and tell what you're doing. Don't throw in the middle of the fish. Fish the edges. Fish the edges of where that fast water and that slow water meet. That's where those fish are at. I have watched these steelhead go 3, 4, 5, 10 feet to grab a fly. When they decide to take it, they will move and go get it. I guarantee you they will, if you present it right. Anybody got any questions? Talk to me.
That was 15 on that maximum?
Yeah, I run 15 on that. I run 15. Well, here's the thing. Because I'm a fly casting geek, when you cast a fly line and you move your line, you're transferring the energy from your fly line into your leader. Okay? Those tapereds are made to dissipate the energy. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, so as it gets thinner, the energy comes out of it. So in real life scenario, that butt section of that should be as thick as diameter as your fly line is, and then taper it down. For these little short, and if I was making longer casts and need everything to roll over and everything, I would want that. For what we're doing, a 15, more than sufficient. More than sufficient. 12 works, but if you want your heavy indicator rigs, I mean, you think about it. A lot of times we need a indicator. We got 2 BB split shot. We got an egg. We got another fly. We got all kind of stuff going on out there, right? So we need some backbone to turn that over. So I would say go heavier than lighter. But that 15-pound range is pretty good, strong. Makes an excellent nail knot. Makes an excellent knot. You just got to tighten it down with that heavier line.
Jack, your definition of a dead drift, just matching a current speed? How would you define
That dead drift is at or slower than, slightly slower than the current on the surface. So when you throw out there, watch a leaf, watch the bubble line, watch whatever's moving on that water, and you want your stuff to be going exactly that same speed. So if I make a cast with a fly rod and I got a loop of line and then it's going to my indicator, this is all pulling. It's going to make it go faster. If I'm fishing downstream on a taut line, it might not be going anywhere. I consider that slower, but the pressure of the water is going to raise my bait right up to the surface. Make sense? At or slower than the rate of the surface.
for the depth you're going?
Yes, I firmly believe in starting shallow and working my way down. Start shallow, work your way down.
How do you do that?
How do you do that?
Make it go slower than slower than
By keeping your line mended. Keeping your line out of the water. So this takes practice. When you cast and you're on a straight line, if I do a roll cast and my line's laying straight out, I got instant drag. Instant drag. The only thing I can do is flop some slack line onto the surface, then mend that. Or, for me personally, I mend my line before it ever hits the water. It's not something I expect a whole lot of people to be able to do. But I can make a cast, mend my line before it ever touches the water. I can make a roll cast, mend my line before it ever touches the water.
The line going to be up current?
Depends on where you're at. So let's say if I got a steady current between me and where I'm fishing, Yes. You're going to mend upstream. Keep everything back behind your float and moving at the same rate of speed. If that water's faster where you're at, but slower where she's at, now that's going to be going that way and this is going to be real slow. So in order to keep up with it, I need to move that, right? So the tip of your rod, when you throw in and your indicator's there, that tip of that rod should follow that indicator downstream. If you're here and you're mending and you're just holding your rod straight out in front of you while your line's going that way, you're defeating the whole purpose. Follow what you have in there. It might be fast right here and slow over there. So that just changes everything again, right? That's why I believe in slackline presentations. Make a cast, keep a little bit of line in your hand, take that rod, whip it one time, throw a bunch of slack right on the water. Throw a bunch of slack in there. All that slack has to come out before you get that drag to your presentation. Does that make sense to you? So it can change. It can change with wherever you're at. There's a bunch of little swirls in there, microcurrents, little eddies, stuff going crazy. You got to be able to follow that and keep it at that same speed. And where people get in trouble is trying too hard. They're trying to move too much line at one time. This is just wee little movements. I got a really, really cool video that I wish I could blow it up. I just got it yesterday from my mentor. He was out fishing in Wisconsin, and they was fishing real low, clear water in a driftless area of Wisconsin. And he had a rising brown trout like 70, 80 feet downstream of him. But he didn't want to sneak up on that fish from above it. And I got a really cool video of him standing in that stream. He made a cast, and he's standing there, and he's just pulling line off his rod, flicking it to the middle of the stream, flicking it to the middle of the stream, throwing hump mends in there, flicking to the middle of the stream. He put a dry fly that is so easy to move and sink whenever you're fishing. He took a dry fly and was able to mend that thing and mend that thing and mend that thing till it went like 70, 80 feet downstream, and he hooked that fish. I got a really cool video of it. So it's just a matter of where you're at and what you're doing. So I can't stand here and say, always mend down, always mend up. It all depends on what's in between you and your float or your presentation. Make sense? That rod tip should always be pointed at your indicator. Follow your indicator all the way downstream. The only time you don't need to do that is when you're upstream and it's coming at you. Now you got to take line. So basically what happens is, if I throw upstream, I'm going to lead that line. Okay? As I get right here, now I'm vertical. So now I got to raise that rod tip up to keep that line off the water, to stay vertical, right? Then as it goes downstream, I got to lower that rod tip to follow that, to keep it down. Because if I let it get taut, it's just going to raise my bait right off the bottom. Make sense to you? So it's a lead, a vertical, and then a follow. Make sense? That is how you do that. Any line laying on the water, you got to mend. And you got to mend whatever direction what you got going on in between you. It's different every place you step. One of the things about reading water, everybody, I'm gonna do this real quick. I got a few more minutes here. I'm gonna do this real quick. I never really understood I listen to people all the time, reading water, reading water, reading water. You gotta be able to read the water. Well, we all think we know what we're doing reading water. Oh, we go out there, we look at it, oh, okay, there's the fast water, there's the seam, there's the bubble line, and that's what you notice. But when I learned to row a drift boat to be a guide, and they brought people over from the Nanatala Outdoor Recreation Center, Olympic professional rowers, people that live their lives in whitewater, to teach us to row these drift boats and these rafts. And the first thing that guy did was walk us up that river. What do you see? And he pointed things out to me that I never had any idea was going on. Never had any idea what was going on. So if you're looking at that surface of that creek and you see fast riffles, that's shallow water. You see a slower pool, that's deeper water, right? You can tell a lot by the color of it. If right out in the middle of that pool you see this little boil, this little bubble, there's a big rock under there or some kind of obstruction that's forcing that water off the bottom to the top. And that's what's making that little swirl on the surface. Hey, that's a good fish holding spot, man. That fish probably laying right behind that rock, right? But you would have never picked that out. You just would have thought that was some little old, just whatever in the current. There's something in there making that happen. That's the way the hydraulics work. So being able to read a stream goes a long way. Goes a long way. So stand back and just look and start dissecting what you're looking at and think about what's making that happen. I mean, I could look at a whole hole and think, man, there's one little hydraulic thing right out in the middle of that. There's something in there. That's cover for that fish. That's my target. Most guys would never even notice it being there. So learning to read water, it takes a little more than just looking at what you're looking at the surface of it and seeing the fast run. Like when I say seam, you got fast water, and right at the edge of that fast water, where it just slows down a wee little bit, that's the water you want to be fishing. Right on the edge of that seam, not in that fast water. Not in that fast water. So what we do with that little step I was talking about earlier, we start right here, we work our way out. Why we do that? How many times y'all walked in the creek and you took 3 steps and there went 4 fish? Can't tell me you haven't done it if you spend any time in the creek. Well, if you'd have stood back on that bank and just take your time going out there, you might have caught 1 or 2 of those. So take your time working yourself out there. Then once you get there, you're hitting that seam, that little seam. That's where the fish are at. Yeah, they're going to get in the fast and they're going to go when they run. But when they're sitting back, they're going to lay in slack water. They're not in that fast water. They're going to lay in that slower water. And they're going to move into that faster water to feed. So when you get right on the edge of that, that's where they're looking to pick off their food. That's exactly where they're looking to pick off their food. So I might fish this side of that seam. If you get there, let's say you got some slower water, we're going to fish that. I got a seam, I got faster water. On the other side of that, I got another seam, right? Then on the other side of that, I got another little pocket. So I might have to get way up over top of that fast water just to fish that other, or maybe I go all the way down below it and hit it from the other side. Make sense? So where you put that line makes a big difference.
European nipping a while back there. Have you been doing that for steelhead? Like you can steel it up and do the same thing?
Yeah, so I have been experimenting with it a good bit. Yeah.
Working out well?
Yeah, it does. It does. I've had some success with it. Really have. That's a whole different ball game. To learn to do that properly, it's really a whole different ball game. That is total constant contact fishing. Light leaders. Everybody thinks you got to have like a 2 or 3 weight Euro nymphing rod. Man, you could Euro nymph with a 9-foot 4 weight. You don't need all that. All it is a long leader, a long level line leader that you're presenting very, very closely. I mean, from me to you, that's a far cast. You're sneaking up on these fish. I mean, you're literally starting here and you're taking a half a step and you're doing a half a step, and that's right here. That's that lead, horizontal, follow, out. Lead, horizontal, follow, out. Constant, constant, constant. But once it works, it works. It does.
What's that presentation from downstream on those tail-out fish look like? Cast and the drift? And
So when I'm fishing downstream and casting up, to me, the most important part of that presentation is a reach cast. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That way I'm not running indicator, my line, everything right over top of that fish. Whether I'm throwing up and reaching to the right or throwing up and reaching to the left. But my presentation's coming here, but my line's over here. That reach cast is key to fishing upstream. Key to fishing upstream.
Taking up the line as it comes to you, how?
Yep. So there's a little thing called a vector haul. So I'm going to do this like this. I'm going to use the mic. I hope you can hear me. So if I'm holding, my line's going out, I'm pinching that line, and I have this line right here in my hand. Okay? As that line comes to me, a lot of people stand there and just feed this line back to themselves. Here, let me do it this way. I'm going to try not to take up too much of the next person's time. So, let me try to. So if I got that line pinched, and people are trying to keep up with this line right here. Pull, 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 pull. No sense in doing all that. From right here, just extend your arm. This is called a vector pull. Think about that. Right there's probably 4 feet, right? Times 2. That's 8 feet of line I just picked up. I didn't have to stand here and do a whole bunch of little 4-inch strips. So that little vector goes a long way in handling that line. Make sense?
Yeah, because your cast is going to be 18 miles up there anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, if you're casting straight up and you're making that reach, man, your line's over here, follow it. Now I still got enough line up to make my next cast.
Yeah, that's good.
Answer question, you know what I mean? I watch too many people this.
Well, yeah.
The same thing when people were fishing streamers. And hey, there's a guy that goes to trout run. He's really good at it. He catches a lot of fish. And I sat there and watched him over the years. And people, oh, he got the perfect fly. I wish I had his fly. Doesn't have anything to do with his fly. I stand there and watch him all the time. I watch everybody stand down there, and they're stripping, 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 stripping. This guy, and he pops it. Another 3 or 4, pops it. Another 3 or 4, pops it. Makes that little, now that jig's just sitting there quibbling. Every now and again got that little twitch, right? Catching fish after fish. So it's what he's doing more than what he got on. What he got on doesn't really matter. But yeah, that reach cast. If you get that reach cast and that vector haul anytime you're upstream. Make sense? Any other questions? Nobody? All right. I thank you.